All right, let's get into a couple of players. I want to ask you about a couple of guys because it's so hard to see kind of how different guys are doing unless the ball goes their way or unless you happen to watch them on, specific route or whatever. But a couple of guys that I think are worth talking about. One, obviously, is Jayden Daniels, and that will wind up hitting on some of the offense, other offensive guys, I'm sure. But anything that stood out for Jayden with the pads on, because there was a couple of muddy pockets today. Like there was some times where he had to move a little bit, had to adjust. There's guys around his feet. Like that hasn't happened yet. How do you think he handled it, and what did you see from Daniels on day one of pads?
I was pretty impressed. It's hard to tell, not having the clicker, like what the pocket actually looks like, because that's when you make some of those decisions. But there was a couple where I was like, man, I love how quick he is in the pocket, how decisive he is. And he's not ever really looking to run, which is such a interesting contrast to like Marcus Mariota, who is always... It's like I'm a little frenetic. I'm pulling the ball to run, and he's had some really nice scrambles. So I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing. It's just different. It's a different philosophy of playing the position, and I think that's been really cool. And again, like with pads on, throwing windows are tighter. Like today, for example, they're in this kind of like flat contour defensively. Looks like they're bringing some type of pressure, man coverage, and Jayden does a great job of identifying his matchup, losing a little ground in the pocket, and throwing the ball on time to Zach. There's a little bit of tug by the receiver or by the DB, which is Jeremy Chin. Not egregious, but it's a tug, and it's incomplete. But I love, again, that he understood that he was getting pressure. He understood that he's getting man. He fell away in the pocket the right way, bought enough time to give Zach an opportunity to win. And again, I think maybe this is my tight end bias, I think Zach won, right? And I think it's, defenses are holding bastards, but that's fine. And... No bias. But all of those things checked boxes. I know what we're doing. I know where the ball should go. I've identified my matchup, and I know how to get the ball there. And minus the tug, it's probably a completion. So I love that. I love that about him, and I love the red zone period. I thought he just knew. Again, like Cliff did a good job of kind of bouncing into some really subtle formational things that we can't talk about too detailed on the podcast, but they were designed to affect the defense in a very specific way. And you could tell Jayden knew what they were trying to affect and where the ball should go. And I love that because he's not holding the ball a long time, which is awesome. So yeah. Love those little wrinkles, love that little pixie dust. But I think the more telling thing out of that is that the quarterback understands what the result should be. And I think that's pretty cool. And there's just it's kind of a constant thing with him. Like every time you think he's going to get tripped up by something, he just kind of meets the challenge, which is pretty cool. And I think today with the pads on, like you were saying, with some of those muddy pockets, with some of those difficult looks, I thought, again, the foot speed in the pocket, the understanding, the anticipation was all there.
Yeah. So on that front, like two things on Jayden and Cliff. I'll start with the Cliff thing because we're here. One thing you hear a lot around the league is like, can the quarterback get a clear picture? And I think what you just described is Cliff's ability to do that for his quarterbacks, because Cliff's got a great reputation for being able to do that. Of like, he gives the quarterbacks a very clean picture with clean reads, and I think part of that is knowing exactly what you're looking at. And I think back to our interview 2 years ago now, or whatever it was, maybe it was before last year with Matt Ryan, where Matt talked about how as his career went and defenses shifted and changed, like those pictures became muddier and muddier, but he eventually found ways to like look in the right place and understand, okay, I don't need to know what coverage it is. I just need to know where that guy is. And I feel like what you're describing is Cliff having an ability to, with formation, with personnel, with whatever it is, in this case, formation, to clear up that picture a little bit and be like, hey man, I don't really care what coverage they're in. I just need you to know where this guy is. And if he goes there, you throw there. And if he goes here, you throw there. And if you can get that clarity for a quarterback and get to your quarterback in the meeting room, this is the clarity that you are looking for, which is two different things, right? It's one thing to create it schematically, like win with the pen. It's another to translate that knowledge of exactly what to look for to the players. And I think at times we've seen that. I think we've seen, some games in the last couple of years where we've gone back and watched the tape, and, you'll point out something to me on a specific play and you'll be like, EB did a great job of getting this guy open, or Scott did a great job of getting this guy open. And we're going, what's the quarterback looking at? And so the same pageness of, hey, quarterback, one, you're getting the look, two, quarterback is looking for that thing. with regularity speaks to both Cliff's ability to do that and Jayden's ability to take in that information and ultimately use it.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% right, and it's still early in training camp, obviously, and we're still early with Jayden, and we don't know where the defense is in terms of install. We don't know where Cliff is in terms of install. We don't really know what Cliff's motivation is with regards to install, but all those things you just said, I think, are 100% true. It's like this is the kind of window dressing, and there's something very, I guess, like what I would associate like with the West Coast offense, this nuance of formation that you didn't see necessarily. Again, you don't see it in college from Cliff. You saw it a little bit in Arizona, but to see it in practice, you're like, man, this guy gets football. Like there was a touchdown to McNichols the other day, and there was like, it wasn't anything complicated, but basically like the defense didn't pass it off correctly and the back's wide open. I'm like, that's great. And it's all it is a little bit of emotion, gets them in a formation. They're not exactly sure who's got who, and they lose the back. And like, that's all it is. And so I've been really pleased with that element of it. I've been pleased with where they're at with that. And hopefully that continues. And hopefully every single week they just keep building off of that. And it's awesome that they can do that because the quarterback's showing, like to your point, that he understands and that he's smart enough to handle it. And I know we've been talking a lot about Jayden, but there's been times where I'm like, hey, that's good job by Marcus Mariota or Sam Hartman, understanding the same principle. Jeff Driscoll, I think, made a play today that was pretty impressive. Same type of thing. And, those latter two guys, Sam Hartman and Jeff Driscoll, are dealing with worse offensive lines, so that becomes a little bit messy for them. But I think on the whole, like, however Cliff has chosen to teach it, however Johnson has kind of supported him in terms of teaching, Tavita, like, one of the things we were wondering about is, like, how do they put a scaffolding around the quarterback position? And so far, again, it's only been 6 practices. It seems like they've done a great job of building that scaffolding for that position group.
Yeah, in red zone today, there's like a couple of wide open touchdowns, and
like wide open
speaks
like silly wide open.
Yeah, like obviously Joe Witt Jr. is going to be like, that's us messing up, but it tells you the conflict that the defense is in, and hopefully Joe and his staff can get that cleaned up for on the defensive side. That's the positive and the negative. The double-edged sort of training camp is like, oh man, great job offense, way to go Cliff, love this. Oh crap, the defense is having trouble with it. Like that's just kind of how it goes.
And
but Cliff did it frequently enough that you're like, man, Cliff's clearly, I don't know what it is. You clearly have a better idea of it. I'm watching at it just, you want to, whether it's because I don't know what it is, period. Even if you showed me the tape, I don't know the names of the concepts, whatever. But also times like you're watching the O-line, all of a sudden a dude's just wide open and you're like, well, it seems to have accomplished what it was supposed to do.
Yeah. And to be fair, like, they've done, the offense is putting some stuff in that you're like, I understand why this is challenging. It's designed to stress defenses in man-to-man coverage, right? And it's designed to have answers versus certain zone coverages. And if that's all the defense has in at the moment, then that's going to favor the offense. Right. So again, like training camp has ebbs and flows. 3 days from now, I bet you the defense is ahead of the curve and you're like, what the heck's wrong with the offense? Like, that's just how it's going to go. You know what I'm saying? Like, they are going to catch up with install-wise. They're going to start matching concepts better. And the defense is going to look like awesome. And that's happened in every single training camp I've been a part of. I will also say that I've been super impressed defensively with how confident those guys are playing in the back end. Like I know they've had some miscues or whatever in the low red, especially like I will say this as an offensive coordinator, like at the high school level, so obviously not in the same vein as them. If you're going to play man-to-man in the red zone, like I as a coordinator, I know that I should win. And so Cliff Kingsbury did win, and that's important. But in the other stuff, I think those guys in the back end have done a great job of communicating and playing fast. So credit to Joe Witt Jr. But like you said, I think coming out of today, like specifically in that red zone period, you're like, ooh, this is good, and it's good stuff. So
yeah. Best play of the day, just random shout out real quick before we get on to some of the other guys. Sam Hartman had a ball and not in the red zone in 11s where he just ripped one to Jamison Crowder on the sideline. That was ridiculous. Like escaped the rush, rolled out, like had to be perfect, was perfect. So salute, shout out to Sam Hartman. Good job on that one. Other things to talk about, other guys to talk about. Jahan Dotson. I was asked about him this morning when I was on with the Junkies, and I feel like he's had a bit of a quiet camp so far, production-wise. What have you seen from him when you've watched him, though? Like, is this just a odd stretch where the ball is going somewhere else? Like, is he not doing things he needs to do? Like, what have we seen from Jahan Dotson so far?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question because, like, when I'm watching, I'm kind of doing multiple things. I'm watching the concept, so I'm trying to figure out who's in. Or watching formation, figure out who's in, where they're lined up, and watching concept. And so I will say I haven't really been focused on Jahan in that way. But like it kind of goes back to that thing we were talking about before, like when you're evaluating people at camp, like are they making plays? And he's been kind of quiet. So I don't know how much he's been in. You know what I'm saying? Which again, like
Right.
that might be a decision from the staff. Like I would imagine that that those comments about I wish I would have had a few more plays are coming from older players, more veteran players. Because I will say, Dan, at least in my experience, knows how to kind of say, this is going to be our team, the nucleus of our team. These guys, we know what they are. We understand they need reps, but like, when do they need reps? Who is it more important that gets reps? The guys we don't know about or the guys we do know about? And so I think that that's also playing into this. Like, it'd be really interesting to go back if we could and tally reps for Jahan and Terry and whoever else, Luke McCaffrey or B-Rob, for example. And I'm sure you'd be like, man, they're actually not getting that many reps or as many reps as like Bryson Tremaine or somebody like that.
For sure. They're way more even than in the
Right.
past. Like traditionally, we've talked about this already in this podcast. Like first teamers would get like 8 reps, second teamers would get like 6 reps, and then the third teamers would get 4 reps if there was time left on the clock. This year, it's like 2 reps rotate, 2 reps rotate, 2 reps rotate. And as the drill goes, those top line guys don't necessarily rotate back in as frequently. And so you might get 2 and then 2 and then you're out, where Tremaine might get 2, 2, 1 out, 1 out, 1 out. And like a guy like Tremaine winds up getting more reps than a guy like Terry.
Yeah, because that's the thing I was going to say, like Bryson Tremaine, Kazmir Allen, name your receiver. Even OZ has a get that many, but those 2 guys in particular, I feel like they're in almost every play. And I think part of it is because Bryson Tremaine is playing X, Z, F, and sometimes he's playing the Y in 4 wide receiver sets. So he's in, especially when they get out of that first group, like a lot. Kazmir Allen's in there a lot. And so again, like Jahan hasn't been super noticeable, but I think part of that is just because like, are those guys playing that much? It doesn't feel like it at the moment. And that seems like a conscious decision.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other guy that I'm surprised has been a little quiet because he had a louder spring is Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah, I was about to say, he kind of falls in that same bucket for me too. It's the same thing with a couple of those guys. Like, like Luke was a guy I was expecting to have a great, not that he's having a bad training camp, but a louder training camp. Dominique Hamilton, is that right?
Hampton,
Hampton,
safety.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Dominique Hampton, like I thought he'd be louder. Mike Sanders I thought would be louder. But again, that doesn't mean they're playing badly. It just means that they haven't flashed the same way. And the rotation might be different now, like with some of these guys. So, again, it's hard to kind of keep track of everybody because, like, I've been watching Brandon Coleman. I've been watching Ben Sinnott. I've been watching Tyler Owens on defense because he's a guy that's got my eye quite a bit. And so your eye tends to gravitate towards – I like watching Bryson Tremaine. I think he does a great job. So my eye tends to gravitate towards those players. That doesn't mean that – those other guys are having bad camps. I just don't have enough file on it to give you like the listener an accurate commentary on where exactly they're at.
Right. And that's how I feel as well. And that's why I was like, am I missing something? But that has been kind of the interesting thing about a guy like Dotson is like Terry has been more involved, even though their reps are probably pretty similar, because there does seem to be a concerted effort when he's in to get him the ball.
Right.
And, we talked about that late last week, especially with Marcus, where there was like that one drive where he just force fed Terry the ball, like 5 straight plays on Emmanuel Forbes, and Forbes did a good job on most of them, but Terry got a deep on him one time. And had another catch, I think, in that sequence as well. But with Jahan, there just hasn't been that same thing, and he's not getting a ton of reps. And so ultimately, the result is a fairly quiet camp. And I just think that's interesting and something to watch as this shifts, because there will be parts of this camp that are, let's get ready for the season. There'll be parts of this camp that are like, let's get ready for the preseason games. Because, to your point, if Dan understands like who his main guys are and just wants them to get ready for the season, part of the evaluation process is the preseason games. Like, that's actually a huge deal. How do you actually play football? Right. And so you want to make sure that you've prepared these end of roster guys for those games. That way they can go out and put forth their best effort, and you're evaluating them based off that, not based off your own failures to prepare them.
Yeah, I mean, when I was with Dan in Atlanta, like one of the things that really stuck out to me was this idea that he knew the roster really well. He had it established from the jump. And so, like, in the third preseason game, if he knew you were going to make the team, and I think this was also him and Dimitrov, like, working through some stuff, you didn't play. So they'd walk out there with, like, how many guys on the roster? Like 40 guys. And they were like, good luck, you're playing the whole time. If you were, like, I was the second string tight end, third string tight end. I didn't dress my first year there. So they
You're
obviously
pissed too because that's your All-Star game.
That's
We've
my
talked
All-Star
about
game. That's the first time I haven't dressed in my whole career for that game. Was that season? I was just like, whoa, this is pretty cool. Like, not to be stressed out and have to worry about this, but it does show, I think. And Sean McVay started doing this in LA. There's a lot of coaches that are moving to this model. It's like, we know who our guys are. Let's make sure it's not about who's ready for training camp or preseason or joint practice. It's about who's ready for week one. So I do think that that's been a big shift across the league. Now, there are still some old school mentalities there, but I do think that that's something to keep an eye on with this group is how are they going to handle that? How are they going to handle the workload going into season? And do they ever ramp those guys up at any point and say, hey, 1v1s, let's go get it. And maybe they save that day for a joint practice or whatever it is. So, again, when you're looking at practice structure for this team, I think it's informative of the depth chart, informative of philosophy, and it's going to be really interesting to kind of keep an eye on that moving forward.
For sure. You mentioned Tyler Owens. I thought one of the most interesting moments of practice today involved him. Kaz Allen bobbled a ball, and Owens was right there. Ball kind of pops up. Allen's able to catch it. And then Joe Witt Jr. comes right up to Owens as the play is ending and is just like, you got to catch that ball, dude.
Yeah.
Like, and I just thought, we hear about the emphasizing of turnovers and the details and all this stuff. And we talked last week about some of the different ways that this staff does it compared to other staffs that claim to do it. But I thought that was a tremendous example of like, when Joe Witt says he's serious about the ball, if you squander an opportunity, he is going to make sure that was an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it also does a couple of things, that little interaction. One, I think it shows you the type of camp Tyler Owens is having so far. He's a big guy. He's fast to the football. He's been more instinctive than his college film showed. But then I think so Joe Witt's going to coach him up and be like, hey, man, let's make sure that ball comes out. But also I think, to your point, it speaks to like people talk about we're about the ball, but like that is how you become about the ball. Every opportunity you have when the ball is in the air, when it's a 50-50 ball, you emphasize why that's important. And I think the eagerness, the zest that he showed coming up to him, I wouldn't say he was angry, but he was just like, come on, like this is it. Like, that's the moment. That's the one. That's the game-changing play. And for a young player to hear that, and that's going to come up in the team meeting. They're going to pull that clip and show that and be like, hey, man, like, way to click and close on this, but let's finish this play and get that ball out. And that either that's an incomplete pass or it's an interception or it's a fumble, like, let's make that happen for us. And I think, like, again, like one of the things that Kyle always did when I was in San Fran in 2017, 2016, whatever year that was, 18, gosh, they're all bleeding together now. But we'd pull clips from practice and be like, this should be a pick, this should be a fumble, this should be whatever. And you're like, oh, like, that's what we're doing. And it really makes you as an offensive player aware of it. And as a defensive player, you're aware of it too. And I just thought that was, like, to your point, just a cool moment, good energy, positive. But hey, man, this is who we are. This is who we want to be. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. Any other guys you want to talk about? Anybody else? I mean, Jamin, again, playing out on the edge. I didn't see him work with the linebackers at all again today.
Yeah.
There's a chance I missed something, but I feel like he's out on the edge now. And I can't say it's going great for him.
Yeah,
and it's
just one of those things.
It's hard, man.
It's really hard. And again, you've said this, and I agree. I like him as a mover. I like him, the way he moves, the way he gets off the football. He could probably do it. It's such a nuanced thing to do, and it's such a short window. Like today, he had like this really nice get off, and Coleman did a great job kind of covering up the angle. So it's like if this is the rusher, right, and the screen's the quarterback, the tackle just set right in front of it. So as a rusher, your job is to like get to an edge, figure something out. And Jamin, like, you could just tell his brain was like, what do I do? Like, and that's hard for rushers, and that takes a long time to cultivate that secondary reaction. So he ends up just running right into him. And Coleman does a great job. Everyone's talked about his balance and his feet, just settles it down, does a great job. But that to me shows again, like the athleticism's there, the get off's there, but it's like when you're playing jazz music, right? And you just can play, like it's not quite there for him yet, and it takes a long time to do that. And I think Coach Tapp, I've seen him kind of pull him off to the side. I've seen Ryan Kerrigan pull him off to the side, and I think they're coaching him and approaching him in the right way. You just got to feel it out in a way that is challenging to do. And again, they're doing the same thing with Jordan McGee, but Jordan McGee is also playing off-ball linebacker. So it's this really interesting situation for Jay Moore. They're like, we've identified your role. Let's make it work, as opposed to McGee, who's got more irons in the fire, more flexibility, seemingly, for the defense.
And has a better contract. Like he was drafted by this year. Like he's worth investing in over time. Jamin is on the final year of his deal. So it's tough sledding for him. Having traits is not enough. There's been a lot of guys that have played a lot more football on the edge that have similar traits as Jamin Davis. I mean, Jamin's pretty special traits-wise, so at least have most of the traits of Jamin Davis. And they're not NFL edge rushers. And to do this at this point in his career is really, really hard. And again, like, we're talking about what we see here. I think both of us liked how Jamin finished the year last year at linebacker, but clearly they didn't see what they needed to continue with him there. They have other people. But then again, weird stuff happens in training camps, and who knows? So a long way to go, and we'll continue to talk about it as we get more data and everything plays out. So that's going to do it for our show today. Tuesday, more practice. Wednesday, off day. So Logan and I are going to take in practice on Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning, I think, is the plan to kind of recap it and see where we are after the first 2 padded practices. And then next week, more take command. Denton Day will be in for me while I am gone in Paris, headed to the Olympics with my wife. So that'll be a lot of fun. If you want to, actually, I'm not working at all. So I was gonna say, if you want to like see tweets about people running in circles, go somewhere else, because I'm gonna go enjoy myself. But Take Command's not going anywhere. Denton is awesome. You guys know him from the Kevin Sheehan show, and he'll be in with Logan, recapping the practices while I'm gone, and then we're back to it right after the preseason game. I'll be back for that, and Logan and I will do a recap show on the day after the Commanders open their preseason. So that's kind of what you can expect. So we'll see you Wednesday morning for another edition of Take Command.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.